made the announcement.
Okay, we're live.
This is a bit of a maze, though, getting back here. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our ongoing history speaker brunch series. Today's topic is Kansas Aviation, and our guest speaker today is Mr. Bill Stumpff. A little bit about Mr. Bill. Bill's retired, likes to travel with his wife and visit, taking their grandkids to as many museums as they can. Bill currently volunteers at the Combat Air Museum in Topeka. Is one of 3 co-presidents of the Lions Club of Topeka, Lincoln Club in Topeka. Sorry, Bill, please take it away.
Thank you very much, and good to see all of you. Coffee and snacks, and very appreciative of that. So I'm going to talk on early Kansas aviation, and just to give you a short summary of some of the things I'll talk about the first plane manufactured in Kansas and flown in Kansas. I'll talk about the first airplane that flew across the United States in 1911 and the Kansas connection. I'll talk about how Wichita became the air capital of the world. I'll talk about some of the other icons of Kansas aviation, and probably many of them that you're very familiar with, but I think there's going to be some people that you might not be familiar with. Okay, the very first flight in Kansas, a plane built in Kansas, is September 2nd, 1911, in a farmer's field on the southeast side of Topeka. This photograph would have been in the Capital Journal, whatever the name of the newspaper was in 1911, the next day. So this was an actual photograph of the first flight. There is a sign, 53rd and Barrington Road, if you're interested in that, but this is where the flight took place. This is a little close-up picture of the airplane on the ground. I showed you this picture of Orville Wright's 1908 flyer because I call it the box kite design, and I think Longren pretty much followed that design. They're actually, this is where he made some of the planes in an industrial area just to the north of downtown Topeka. It's listed on there. Now, Clyde Cessna flew in June 2nd, 1911. Okay, 3 months ahead of Longren. But Longren's considered the first plane flown in Kansas, built in Kansas. This is in Enid, Oklahoma. He had a car dealership. So he built his plane in his farm west of Wichita. He flies it in Enid, Oklahoma. The first time he tried to fly it, it broke. He repaired that. He tried 12 more times, and mechanical failure or crashes. And finally, he says, if it's the last thing I do, I'm going to make this airplane fly. Then I'm going to light it on fire, and I'm not going to have anything else to do with aviation. That's Clyde Cessna. Cessna is the largest that has built and sold more airplanes than anybody in the world. So you have to admire his stick-to-itiveness. And again, now he kind of copied this Leroy flyer, the first plane to cross the English Channel. And if you see, now Cessna's planes all had the single wing, whereas most of the older planes were biplanes. Okay, so that was his design, probably his innovation, probably one of the factors that led to the successes of Cessna. Okay, the first airplane flight across the United States took off from New York September 17, 1911. Cal Rogers is flying. That's a Wright flyer. There was a $50,000 prize put out by William Randolph Hearst. The first person to fly across the United States catch is 30 days. So he lands in Kansas City in October, so his 30 days is almost up. He's crashed 4 times. He's got a 2-car train, boxcars that he's following, and it has repaired parts and pieces. So he lands in Kansas City. If you've been to Swope Park, out on the very southeast side is a big old brick pavilion built, and it was there in 1911. The field is almost exactly like he landed in 1911. 5,000 people show up. It was the end of the trolley track, so everybody in Kansas City showed up for that. He actually flies over to Overland Park. They had 2 airports in Overland Park by 1911. And they had a hangar, so he hangars there. Takes off from Overland Park the next day, follows the trolley out of Overland Park and the Katy Railroad track. He's going to follow the Katy Railroad track all the way down through Oklahoma and then pick up probably another railroad. So he's going to pass through Parsons, Kansas. Well, this is a picture of 2 teenagers that are out to see the first airplane that flew across the United States. And over here on the left is Tubal Claude Ryan. Tubal is Noah's grandson. I did look that up in case you want to know, but he's known by Claude Ryan. His family moves to LA. He becomes involved in aviation, learns to fly around World War I, and later starts Ryan Aviation. And we'll talk a little more about that. I often want to follow with his partner or his compatriot there to see what he did. This is a little bit of an interesting picture. I like it in Wichita in 1911. So here, these probably the Curtiss flying demonstration crew, and I doubt that they're 50 feet off the ground. You got the guy over here on a horse and buggy, and then if you look in the background, there's the cars, the horse and buggies, gentlemen on the horseback, and the airplane. I just like that picture because of all the transportation modes coming together at one time. Okay, this is the Cessna factory in 1916, just on the east side of downtown Wichita. This is one of his first planes. He only made 2 of these, so it's really not considered an early airplane manufacturing company. Okay. All right, World War I shows up, and now all of a sudden the Germans are way ahead of at least the United States. I don't know about Britain and France. And so we've got serious competition in the air. So the United States develops, this is at 1917, this would be still the United States Army Air Corps. They have about 30 of these air bases training pilots. This one is a picture of Waco, Texas. And why I show it to you is several of the pilots that trained at Waco, Texas were involved in the very first manufacturing plant in Wichita. And so that's kind of one of the instigators of getting all these people together in Wichita. Okay, the Curtiss Jenny, this is a 1915 picture. I believe the Curtiss Jenny back here is a 1916 original, and you're very lucky to have that. We've got the Combat Air Museum, we have a replica. The gentleman actually worked in the Curtiss factory in Hammondsport, New York. So in 1915, airplane manufacturing in the United States had almost ground to a halt in many ways, and the reason was the Wright brothers had all these patents on these airplanes, And anybody that came up with anything else, the Wright brothers, that's a patent infringement. So the courts were involved, you know, the last decade. Glenn Curtis of Curtis Airplanes, his statement was, you can stand outside and flap your wings and the Wright brothers sue you for patent infringement. I show you this picture, well, let's back up. So with all this bottleneck on manufacturing airplanes, the war production, I gotta get this 5-part name exactly right here. The War Department Aircraft Production Board says, and the director is a young assistant director of the Navy by the name of Franklin Roosevelt. He says, we're just going, okay, everybody's going to share in this design. You can all make these Curtiss Jennies, but we're not going to develop new airplanes through the duration of the war. They did receive, now that came about in 1917 when we decided, when we were entering the war. They did get some huge orders from Britain and France that ended up making the Curtiss factory, that he built a new factory. It wasn't Hammondsport, New York. He built a new factory in Buffalo, the largest airplane manufacturing plant in the world at that time in 1917 or 18. Another item that the War Production Board said that we're going to build these Liberty engines, a 12-cylinder V12. And the reason I show you that, a couple of reasons I show you that this is Hap Arnold Major at this time, next to the one of the first ones came out. Well, Hap Arnold, I think he was a major at that time. He was out in Fort Riley with the Signal Corps, and it said that he had the first air-to-ground communication, 6 miles out in 1911 in Fort Riley. Well, the other thing about that, okay, so this engine that has quite a story like that, Cadillac refused to make this engine because William Durant, the president of Cadillac, was a pacifist. I'm not building it war material. So Henry Leland leaves Cadillac and gets an order for $10 million on these engines and starts the Lincoln Motor Company. So that's where Lincoln Motor Company starts. Okay, how you test these engines? You put the engine on the back of, I don't know if it's Model A or what, and then you put a dynamometer, hook it up, and then you drive up Pike speed. You test the engine. What's the
2,000 feet or something, isn't it?
Huh?
Was it 5,000, 8,000 feet?
No, 14,000.
14,000?
Yeah, so you start measuring it at 6, 7, 8. You know, how effective is this engine at what speed? Then you tell your pilot, you know, you don't go above 10,000 or what at that point. You know, until they had fuel injection, you know, you were limited. You got up in the higher elevations. Okay, talking about the Curtiss Jenny. In 1918, the war is still going on, May 15th. This is your first airmail plane from Washington, D.C. to New York. Lindbergh, after the war, bought you can buy these Curtiss Jennies after the war for $500. Everybody started their own Daredevil show on these airplanes. I've given this presentation. People said, "Oh yeah, Lindbergh was down at my grandparents' place down by Wichita, and he'd actually headquartered out in Bird City, Kansas, out in the very northwest part of the town." All right, 1918, the war's going on. El Dorado oil field is the largest oil field in the United States. I think it's 80,000 barrels a day. Anyway, the other thing that happens is the war demand for oil increases, so the price of oil doubles to the great price of $3 a barrel back in 1918. So they get 80,000, I think it was 80,000, yeah, 80,000 barrels a day, $3 a barrel, that's $240,000. In 1918, money, you take that times 20, so you've got like $4 or $5 million a day coming out of this oil field 30 miles to the northeast of Wichita. A gentleman by the name of Jake Mullendeck is a huge owner in these oil fields, and he's going to play an important role. Okay, the 1919 Laird Swallow would be considered the first aircraft manufacturing company in Wichita. And 1919, they manufactured 40 of these. Basically, it's a cleaned up Curtis Jennings. And I want to kind of tell you the principles, and it tells a story about Wichita Aviation. Jake Mullendeck was a principal. He was the oil man that would supply most of the money from the El Dorado oil field. William Burke was a car dealer, a Buick car dealer in Oklahoma. If you don't own the oil fields, the next best thing is to have a car dealership in Oklahoma, because everybody, with all that oil, if they had a flat tire, they just got a new car almost. I've heard that happened a time or two. But the company was actually called the E.M. Laird Airplane Company, and one of the principals was E.M. or Matty Laird. He was from Chicago, but he had trained at the Rich Field down in Waco, Texas, and William Burke knew him, so those two got together. He had built airplanes up in the Chicago area. And then, so he's a principal. And then he leaves the company in 1923 and starts his own aircraft company. And to give you a reference on that, he built these little fast racers. 1931, Jimmy Doolittle wins the Bendix race from Los Angeles to Cleveland in one of these Matty Laird planes. Another principle of this, it's called the E.M. Laird Company, making this Laird Swallow, is Buck Weaver. Well, he leaves the company at some time in the 20s, and he starts the Weaver Aircraft Company of Ohio, or WACO. Excuse me. And then Walter Beach is another principal. He had trained at Richfield, knew William Burke, and he's another principal in this company. And he's going to start Beach Aircraft in 1932. Another principal is Lloyd Stearman. He starts Stearman Aircraft in 1926. Clyde Cessna he had just bought one of these planes to stay involved, so I'm counting him as a principal, affiliated principal. He starts Cessna in 1927. So of the 7 principals of this first company in Wichita, 5 of them start their own aircraft company, okay? And one guy is the oil money man, another guy's a car dealer money man. So you've got the basis for Wichita Aviation right here in the very first manufacturing plant. The Super Swallow, they made about 20 of those. Okay, so you got this first company, and they all start leaving to start their own companies. In 1924, Walter Beach, Clyde Cessna, and Lloyd Stearman start Travel Air Company. And a very important company. We'll talk some more about this plane. You can't see all of the name of Bull Rock. But I'll just tell you ahead of time, 1927, a young aviator comes to Walter Beach and says, "Can you build me a plane that'll fly 4,000 miles nonstop?" He says, "Son, I'm busy right now. I can't do it." And they were making quite a few airplanes. It was a leader in airplane manufacturing. We'll get to that a little bit later. All right, so we're going to back up to the first guy that flew the plane here in Kansas, Longren. So, both Longren and Cessna closed down their plants during World War I. They could not get jobs to make parts for some of like the Curtis Jenny or something. After the war, Longren comes back and opens up his manufacturing here. This is a building that still exists in North Topeka. He makes a plane, it has the first composite shell. He has a patent on this. This is, everything else was tubing, wood, or some of the later ones that had metal, but they used fabric around them. Now this is layer and layer of composite, almost like a plywood, and it develops strength. But he has a patent on that, and he also has this folding wing airplane. The Navy buys 3 of them to test them on the carriers. Well, they had placed an order for 8 more, but they didn't think Longren could complete the orders timely, and they canceled it. A lot of these guys, when they first developed their, the Wright brothers, Longren, Cessna, they were tinkerers. I'm going to get this right, or it's not going out of my plant. And so production time schedule was not their best characteristic. So the Navy cancels. So he has a patent on this. And now the other thing was, so the Navy canceled, but he thought the selling point of his airplane would be you could put it on the back of a Model A truck, fold the wings, and take off someplace, and then unfold it and go. It didn't work. It didn't sell very well. Great idea, I guess. Okay. Over in Kansas City in the 20s, this American Eagle, they made, I think they made 300 of these at Fairfax plant in Kansas City. Rearwin Ken Royce, Ray Rearwin, he builds his first plane in a garage in Salina, Kansas. And then he moves his manufacturing plant to Kansas City. And this little speedster here, he, what did he make? He made about 100 of those planes. Anybody from Lawrence, they got into the act too. They built this Allison Sport over in North Lawrence. He only built a couple of them. Okay, so Cessna leaves Travel Air. They started that in 24, Beach, Cessna, and Stearman. He starts the Cessna Aircraft Company in 1927. This was one of the first planes he built. And I think they sold 80 of those. The Army bought 80 or 20 of these. Now this is Clyde Cessna promotion to show the strength of that single wing, because most of the planes at this time were the bi-wings. And to show the strength of it, this picture with all the workers, and I'm thinking that might, I don't know which one's Clyde Cessna, but I was telling that I showed this to somebody, and I've seen other pictures. This, not the people on the wings, but they would put bags of sand starting here at the center of the fuselage and work their way out till they measured strength in that wing, and that was their original measurement of strength. And so he showed this people standing on it as a promotion. Stearman, so Lloyd Stearman, he leaves he leaves Travel Air, and then he starts his Stearman Aircraft Company in 1926 in California, and the city fathers of Wichita, getting back into Wichita, and he starts Stearman in Wichita in 1927. He ends up in 1929 selling this to a United Transportation, which Boeing is part of. Boeing builds 10,500 of these by the time they cut off the production in 1945. So very, very popular plane. All right, we were talking a little bit about Claude Ryan. First time he ever sees an airplane, it's the plane that was flying across the United States. I will tell you, well, I'll save it for another time. But so Walter Beach says, I'm too busy to build you a plane that'll fly 4,000 miles nonstop. He goes out, Claude Ryan, can you build it? Yes, I can. So this is where the Spirit of St. Louis was built with Ryan Air, a Parson, Kansas native, in 1927. Okay, so Lindbergh flies across the Atlantic solo in 1927. I think it's May or June. And so James Dole of Pineapple fortune fame said, I'm going to finance a race from Oakland, California to Hawaii. Of the 15 entries here, 2 of them make it to Hawaii. Some of them crashed, never made it off the runway. There were several that were lost in the ocean between Oakland and Hawaii. In fact, one of the planes going out to search for one of the planes that was lost, they were lost. So, but anyway, this Willow Rock I showed you, you can see that plane. That's the one that won first place. It's a Travel Air made by the company Walter Beach. You can see that in hanging up in the Willow Rock Museum out west of Martinsville. And I'm not sure. I think it was a Travel Air that actually made it in the second place too. Okay, Wichita. Been asked this question at the Combat Air Museum. How did Wichita become the air capital of the world? Well, in 1928, Wichita built over 9,000 airplanes in Wichita. New York built 8,000 something, and Ohio built 8,000 something. So they took that and ran with it, and rightfully so, that Wichita is the air capital. And what happened after 1928, I couldn't tell you. But they did, at one point, produce more airplanes in Wichita than in any state in the United States. A big part of it was that Travel Air company, that Beach, Cessna, and Stearman part of it. All right, along comes the Great Depression. Longren and Cessna close up. Beach, okay, Travel Air was bought by Curtiss Wright. Now, so you got the Wright brothers and the Curtiss airplane manufacturing suing each other for 10 years. They finally merged. Wilbur had died and Orville sold out in 1915. So there's no Wright brothers in the Wright Aeronautical. They buy Travel Air. Well, in 1932, Walter Beach talks one of the engineers. They had actually designed this airplane for the Curtiss Wright company. No, we don't want it. So Beach brings him over, starts his company in 1932, still in the middle of the Depression. It has steel tubing, but it's still fabric on that. But all over 200 miles an hour for a bywing. That's pretty impressive. It really is a slick. And you've got, for one of the first times, you've got retractable landing gear. So, you know, you you're starting to get more aerodynamic. He sells 700 of these, so he gets it. He's going pretty strong. Now, Cessna starts back up in 1934, C-34 in 1934. Well, Clyde Cessna basically turns over his manufacturing to his nephews. And, okay, there, see if I can get, okay, Dwayne and Dwight Wallace. Cessna's sister married Wallace, and so it's his sister's kids. They go to Wichita Aviation Engineering, and they're engineers. So they basically are running the Cessna company from 1934 on, and are primarily responsible for the large growth of the Cessna company. Cessna made 5,000 of these UC-78s. The very first, if you ever remember the TV series Sky King, the gentleman, he flies one of these around his huge ranch. So this is a twin engine trainer for the military. They built, like I said, 5,000 of them, but it's still wood and fabric. So it's lightweight and it's fairly inexpensive. Now, Beech comes up with this all aluminum, little bigger engine, again, twin engine trainer for the military, and a little more expensive, but he sells over 5,000 of these. So it really puts Beech and Cessna on the way. Now this Culver Cadet, they built 3,000 of these down in Wichita, but there was a media blackout on it, and nobody knew about this company and what they were doing until after the war. But it's a drone. They radio control it, I guess, target practice or whatever. I'm not really sure, but they built 3,000 of those in Wichita. All right, the government builds the B-29 plant for Boeing down in Wichita, and they make 1,600 of these. The government also built about 16 air bases, airports around Kansas, and they sent these planes, the B-29, out for modification to Salina, Kansas, Great Bend, Harrington, Pratt, Walker, and Topeka, Kansas. So D-Day's coming up. We want to bomb Japan. Hap Arnold goes out and says, "We got to get these planes out of here. Production, got to get it moving." So they move them out to these airfields and make final modifications out there, out there on windswept prairie, changing out engine cowling or something like that. Crazy. But anyway, none of these were at D-Day, but we did, of course, bomb Japan. The most expensive weapon system in World War II. The next one is the Manhattan Project. The Manhattan Project's going nowhere unless you have this airplane to carry it. All right, the B-25 aircraft plant in Fairfax in Kansas City, Kansas, the government built that in 41 or 2. They built about 6,000 of these B-25s. The planes that the Doolittle raid off of the carrier to bomb Japan were made in the California factory, not made here. But so when either Germany or Japan surrendered, 4,000 people got their pink slip the next day for this plant. That was the end of the production. All right, so right after the war, General Motors, they leased this plant from the government for the great amount of $1 a year. I wish I owned General Motors stock from 45 to 55. But, so they're making Buick, Pontiacs, and Oldsmobiles. You can see the trunks up. There's a conveyor up there with Buick, Pontiacs, and Oldsmobiles. And down here is F-84 fighter jets. Never done before, made new airplanes and new cars in one factory. And it has never been done since. Didn't work out as quite as they thought there'd be this, well, you know, I'm making the jet and you're making the car. Well, you can just trade jobs, you know, it just didn't work out. But it's an interesting adventure. This F-84 down at the Wichita Air Museum was built in Kansas City. Kansas City. Anyway, with that, I'm going to wrap it up and see if you got any questions or. Yes, sir.
The plant in Fairfax, did Senator Truman have any impact on that?
No, that would have been, it was probably finished before Truman took over. It was finished before, because Truman took over, what, 44?
No, I meant as a senator.
Oh, as a senator. Okay, I thought you were talking as the president. Well, I think what I've read, the primary reason for picking the location, you know, one, you wanted mid-America to get away from the coast, where we had, you know, this B-25 was made in California, so if the Japanese were to bomb, so we need something mid-range, and you know, Kansas City had a pretty good aviation background. I can't remember the other factors, you know, I don't know if railroad but there was, you know, several factors, but I'm sure he probably,
made it easier.
huh?
I'm sure he helped out.
Well, actually, this is in Kansas now. He may not have, so I don't know who the senator from Kansas was at that point. There was another plant in Kansas City, the government built for Pratt & Whitney. They employed 11,000 people. Made double 2-row 18-cylinder radial engines.
The B-29's engine, right?
Huh?
The B-29's engine.
No, the B-29 original engine was a 28-cylinder radial engine. We've got a cutaway of it, you know, combat. You've got to see it before computers, to have 4 rows of 7 or 7 rows of 4 in a configuration, remarkable. 3,000 horsepower, but yeah, it was a 28 cylinder. The engines made in the Pratt & Whitney plant would have gone in the fighters, and it moved the American military, Navy, and Army Air Force way ahead of Japanese. In fact, the Zeros would just run, because they couldn't outrun or armor.
Did any of the Kansas aviation companies ever build planes for Amelia Earhart?
I don't think so. Lockheed built she had a little racer that's I think in the Smithsonian. Lockheed built that. Lockheed actually built the plane that they've got a copy of, whichever way, Atchison over here, that they've got a copy of, and that she never came back on, the Lockheed Electra 10E. But those are 2 famous planes. What other one she flew, I couldn't tell you.
Okay.
But I don't recall that she ever flew some Travel Airs or Cessnas or, yeah, I don't recall. Good question.
That one plane that you pointed out, that was a drone.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one. Is that the first model where the wing was under the fuselage?
A low wing, is that the first model? That's a good question. I don't think I know the answer to that. Cessna's was a high wing.
Mhm.
Well, now this is in the late 30s. It's a low wing twin engine. So I'm going to say from that, probably not, but I don't know that. This is 27. Everybody's high wing. Spirit of St. Louis is high wing. And I'm not sure, the engineering ramification of the low wing or high wing.
Yeah. What year was this?
This
The
cadet,
cadet, yeah.
it's during World War II.
Okay, so in the 40s.
Yeah, by the symbol on it, that's about 44, isn't it? The star on it.
Yeah.
Went through different iterations.
Okay.
Yeah.
The state side of one of those is
Yeah.
probably 44, 45. See the big antenna on it?
Yeah, yeah.
That's the giveaway we talked. I'm gonna look it up. I wonder if that's how it's controlled. 'Cause
Yeah.
most of them didn't have a width like that.
Yeah.
It must be something different.
I guess they'd send them up unmanned, and I had no idea that they had
Didn't think they had drones back then.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
Exactly.
the first drone was actually an American. It was made in 1918. It was the 1919 offensive.
Mhm.
It took off from the ground. It was aimed on an azimuth full of explosives called bug, entering bug. In World War II, we tried to come up with drones. That's how Joseph Kennedy was killed. Joe Kennedy, the
Yeah, yeah.
oldest of the Kennedys, the one who was supposed to be president. He took off in a B-17, him and another pilot. They were Navy pilots in an Air Force, Army Air Force B-17. And they were to get it to a certain altitude, bail out, and another plane following it. And they'd set these switches. The other plane following it, fly it into a German U-boat pad. It was a way to fly right into the gate of the U-boat and blow up. Something went wrong, we don't know what, and there was an electrical short or something. It exploded with both of them aboard, killed. That's how we lost Joe. But we had a series of these, usually using much bigger aircraft. I've never seen little ones like that. We had a whole bunch of these that we were developing for the invasion of Japan.
So like they're developing the B-25s or the B-24s or 17s or something, we were developing them? Or
Yeah.
do you know?
Yes.
Okay.
We were modifying our own worn-out aircraft in a lot of cases.
Okay.
But then there was some specially built ones. I didn't know about this one. What was interesting is we captured so many V1s that we had them reverse engineered and actually fired some of them at Japan in 1945. We mounted them on B-17s and dropped them off the wings.
Oh, drop them off the wings.
And they'd take off from Okinawa and just lob them kind of towards Japan. They weren't very accurate, but we were very, very interested in drones and standoff weapons.
Very good. Thanks everybody for coming out.
Thank you.